people, we've got to fight. Jean Petro, you see us. Oh, we've got to fight. Let's go fight. Oh, black people, we've got to fight. Zumbi, you see us. Oh, we've got to fight. Let's go fight. Oh, black people, we've got to fight. Yes, Santa, why you see us? Oh, we've got to fight. Let's go fight. Oh, black people, we've got to fight. Bookman, you see us. Oh, we've got to fight. Let's go fight. Oh,
we have to have the courage to construct our own reality. And that's what Garvey was talking about. Because he said he looked around, he didn't see what he thought should be there, and so what did he do? He didn't get depressed about it. He didn't get defeated about it. He said, I'm going to build the government that we need to have. Ooh, where do you get that kind of boldness from? So we got to go all the way back to Garvey, who said he would come again. He said he would be here with us, no matter how long it took. And I'm telling you that the way he comes back is in our work. Not honoring him in words, pomp and all of that stuff, but honoring him through doing what he did. How many of us have the courage to do that? The man took on the world for us and in our name. And then we come to Sodai. And in this presentation of the paradigm, I'm going to make this like what it is we want to reach. So Sodai is translated clear word in Dogana language. And I use it to mean that here we gain understanding. This is sight with understanding. And it is seeing beyond what just we think we see with this physical thing. It's seeing beyond that. And so we gain vision, because that's what vision is. With vision, you've got to be able to use the imagination informed by the African spirit. And Brother Amos, who I work very closely with, was a good friend of mine. He taught me, and he would talk about imagination. Image a nation. Do you see? But that's got to be part of vision. To be a visionary, you got to see beyond this box here. You got to see beyond the ma'afa. You got to see what is it that our people rightfully should have, and that's what Garvey did. Garvey had a vision.
New era, new transition. Greetings, this is Shakara, and it's been an honor serving you as director of gotkushTV. Over the past few years, we've brought you the pilot of the Black Root Economic Show, many seasons of Wordsmith, The Insight, and the ever popular Decipher. We have covered community events and even hosted a few of our own, including Blacktricity as a part of the official Ghana Beyond the Return roster. We also kept you company throughout lockdown with the Quarantine Convo. After a brief hiatus, we came back with our regular weekly interactive live show, Zivanai, keeping you up to date with current events around the black world, from the UK to Senegal to Haiti and beyond. It is our aim to continue to develop as a premier black media institution, and for that reason, we have a special announcement. Introducing Kima Media. Between the 10th of June and the 17th of Mosiah, August, we will be transitioning to a new name and institution, Kima Media. In the beautiful Kiswahili language, Kima means whirlwind.
Look for me in a whirlwind or a storm. Look for me all around you. For with God's grace, I shall come back with countless millions of black men and women who have died in America, those who have died in the West Indies, and those who have died in Africa, to aid you in the fight for liberty, freedom, and life.
Our name symbolizes our aim to take the media landscape by storm, developing high quality, impactful, geopolitical and cultural content aimed at empowering African people, bringing knowledge, information, inspiration and analysis from an unapologetically Pan-African, universal African nationalist and African-centered perspective. So, what can you expect? We are gradually developing a full spectrum of flagship shows and presenters, but in the immediate right here now, over the next couple of years, we have two major aims in bringing you our flagship shows. One, the return of Kush Community, bringing you high-level scholarship in all areas of people activity, featuring luminaries from across the black world. And two, the production of the full first season of the new and improved Ujamaa Black Group Economic Show. While we encourage you to develop and support black businesses, this show aims to raise our awareness of the political economy of today's world and popularize new solution paradigms in political economy among African people. Alongside all this, we will continue to bring you Zivanai, Jaliba, the Afrocentric perspective, All Eyes on Africa, Ghana, Democracy Under Fire, the Revolutionary Minds team with that artistic, ancestral energy, and as things grow and develop, there'll be plenty more. We also have plans to host live events and film screenings, so stay tuned for more information on that. So what can you do? Continue to support us by watching, liking, sharing and commenting on our content. Be sure to follow us on all social media, and if you are so moved, join our Patreon community. We'll be sharing flagship shows exclusively with our Patreon community before general release and granting you discounts to events and future screenings. Right now, if you become a Patreon, you will have access to the pilot for the Black Group Economic Show and all installments of last year's Black History Month series, Sankofa, The Future of Black History. At some point, we'll be engaging in community crowdfunding towards the production of the new and improved Ujamaa Black Group Economic Show, complete with offerings and perks for those who choose to invest in us. Look out for the launch, and we thank you in advance for your support. Any questions, feel free to hit us up in the comment section and we'll be sure to address. We look forward to you joining us for this new phase of our development. Stay tuned as we bring you Kima Media. See, forgiving facts, trigger happy, keeping me in check right there. 10 damn Wadi. Be thankful unto the mother, father, creative life force of the universe. Kudzai, Modzimu Mokuru, we give praises unto our great ancestors. Abibi Tumi, Abibi Fahodi, African power and African liberation. For all African people, greetings and welcome, brothers and sisters. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. We are here on this, the Ojima Day, Tuesday, the 2nd of July, the month they call July, brothers and sisters. Yes, indeed. For a very, very powerful conversation, which we're going to be getting into in our regular Zivanai slot. For those who are unaware, Zivanai is a beautiful word spoken in the Shona language of Zimbabwe, which simply means, let us get to know each other. Yes, indeed, brothers and sisters, make we talk, 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 make we talk. Yes, brothers and sisters, we're going to be getting into the situation today, and I'm going to, get to what I'm going to open with and see how brothers and sisters want to interact from there on out. But as you come through, we ask you to hit the like button, hit the like button, hit the like button. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Utilize the chat and the comment section. Share the video far and wide. Make the people that know that Shakara is live on gotkushTV, soon to be known as Kima Media, from now and for the next few hours. We're going to be discussing, as you can see in the title, the capitalism versus socialism trap. The capitalism versus socialism trap. And last week, it's a bit of a follow-up from last week's conversation still, where we was talking about the propaganda of white power, Western imperialist power in today's world, brothers and sisters, and how they try to direct and channel our political and intellectual energy to support in them political economy. We're going to get back to that, brothers and sisters. But some of you may know that there is much taking place in the Pan-African world at this moment in time. We want to send love to our people in Azania, South Africa, who are in the midst of basically the sellout of a new government, which is formed with the Democratic Alliance, which is basically white power in South Africa, and the ANC, which is the agent of white power in South Africa, brothers and sisters. So we're going to be discussing that in a future show. Our guests are being lined up at the moment for that show, so do stay tuned. We want to send solidarity, love, and strength to our brothers and sisters who are in Kenya, who are out on the streets. We want to send prayers and blessings. Mojuba, we honor the lives of those who have been slain on the streets of Kenya for standing up for the rights and the sovereignty of the people of Kenya, standing against the neo-colonial regime of William Ruto in Kenya. We want to send special love to all brothers and sisters who are facing police and military on the streets, who are releasing themselves of fear and continuing to stand up for themselves and each other in the face of a brutal onslaught in reaction to a just demand, brothers and sisters. And so do stay tuned. Once again, we're going to be having more conversation on that. Our guests in Kenya are also being lined up, and we will be bringing them to you very, very soon, brothers and sisters. So do stay tuned for all of that. Yes. We want to also send special love and a special shout out to all brothers and sisters in the Caribbean at the moment who are in the wake or soon to be in the wake of Hurricane Beryl. As brothers and sisters may be aware, that a hurricane is currently sweeping through the Caribbean. So far, we know that Grenada, Carriacou, and St. Martin have been affected. Trinidad has been affected, but from what I understand, somewhat less than Carriacou. Carriacou, it seems, has been hit the worst, and Grenada has been hit the worst. Then we also have Barbados, who I believe was the first to receive Hurricane Beryl, and Hurricane Beryl is now currently on its way to, or if not having arrived, at the island of Jamaica, brothers and sisters. And so there is a lot of devastation going on. And if you are in the Caribbean, yes, or have spoken to your family in the Caribbean, you can feel free to give us an update on that what you are facing, what the conditions are during the show. Yeah, anybody who comes on to discuss Hurricane Beryl and what is taking place in the Caribbean, especially if you are on an island affected by Hurricane Beryl, you will be able to do so. I've had contact with my sister in Grenada, and she says, you know, it was, you know, a holy patting, you know what I'm saying? I go on over there, so. But thankfully, she is fine. I've also spoken to brothers and sisters in Trinidad. Apparently, no fatalities have been recorded. I don't know if that's the case for Carriacou. As far as Grenada is concerned, I don't believe any fatalities have been recorded there either. But please do correct me if I am wrong. And the same for Barbados, yeah. But Carriacou, as I understand it, and St. Martin has been devastated, yeah, devastated by Hurricane Beryl. And so as a result of all of that, brothers and sisters, I want to share with you, for those of us who are in London, and I'm trying to get information about Birmingham and Manchester as well, but as yet that information has not come to me, yeah. But in terms of relief, brothers and sisters, you can check out drop-off point Mo Better Cuts, yeah, in Ladbroke Grove, 316A Ladbroke Grove. That's London W10 5NQ, yeah. For more information, you can contact Saskia on 07572 492 258. That's 07572 492 258. Brothers and sisters, if you are watching and anywhere you are in the world that you know of relief checkpoints and drop-off points that are taking place, that are being organized in relation to the hurricane relief for the Caribbean, please post the information in the chat and in the comment section, and or you can feel free to come live and let the brothers and sisters know Wagwan, because it's very important that we get the tigs out to the people. Them what is being asked for, brothers and sisters, is non-perishable foods, water, children, adult clothes, nappies, toiletries. I'm gonna add sanitary towels. Yeah, this is not listed here, but I want to emphasize the sanitary towels. If it's emphasized nappies and toiletries, but let's emphasize the sanitary towels as well, because obviously that's a specific need for our sisters. And so we want to specify that one as well, yeah. And so these are the things that are being requested for the drop-off at Mo Better Cuts in Ladbroke Grove. That's 316A Ladbroke Grove, brothers and sisters. Urgent relief needed for Grenada, Carriacou, and Petit Martinique. I believe I've been saying Saint Martinique. Petit Martinique is actually referred to in the wake of Hurricane Beryl, yeah. And so all donations are welcome. I'm sure financial donations are welcome as well in relation to being able to buy stuff, yeah. So feel free to pop down to Mo Better Cuts. As this develops, I'm sure there'll be other drop-off points, yeah. So if you're not in West London, which Ladbroke Grove is in West London, I'm sure there'll be ones in South London and Northwest and East and so on, brothers and sisters. Yeah, so do stay tuned for more information. We will keep you all in tune. We will keep you all in tune. All right. I'm gonna make this announcement a couple times throughout the show, because people are going to be coming in and out all the time, and I want people to be aware of Wagwan Deso. All right, brothers and sisters. Before I get into the main topic that I'm going to be bringing, I'm going to do a bit of a reading, so I'm going to hold you for a bit, and we are going to now just give you some information about what is taking place on gotkushTV, Kima Media in the coming weeks. Next week, brothers and sisters, next week on the 11th of July, Elder Cecil Gutsmore returns, brothers and sisters, and he's speaking on, is revolutionary Pan-Africanism the praxis for African liberation now? Is revolutionary Pan-Africanism the praxis for African liberation now? I urge brothers and sisters to come through for that. Elder Cecil, whenever he comes through, is extremely informative and thought-provoking. And every now and then we have a little bit of a mini debate. You know what I'm saying? I'm loathed, yeah, to debate with my elder, because I learn so much from him. But every now and then, you know, I will challenge him. Yeah, for the sake of all of our edification, your edification, as well as my own brothers and sisters. And so we're going to be getting into that last month, June, was actually the 50th anniversary of the 6th Pan-African Congress that took place in Tanzania in 1974. And so I'm going to be asking him about that. And that's one of the places at which this terminology revolutionary Pan-Africanism was actually defined. Yeah, so we're going to be getting into that little piece, and it actually relates to what I'm going to be talking about today as well. So if you want to follow up effectively from what we're going to be what I'm going to raise today, then feel free to come through for that particular show. Once again, 11th of July, that's at 7 p.m. BST, which is 2 p.m. EST, brothers and sisters, and we're going to be there for a couple of hours. So even if you can't come through for the beginning, feel free to come through whenever you can, if you're across the waters. Kind of the time difference is real, you know what I mean, and all of these things, brothers and sisters. All right, so give thanks, brothers and sisters. Give thanks. All right. I also want to let you know about Drums of Mosiah. Yes, indeed, on the birthday of the most honorable Marcus Mosiah Garvey, we are going to take over Brixton Square. Bring your drum and come. Bring your drum. Bring your shekere. Bring your agogo bell. Bring your mbila. Bring your balafon. Bring any piece of percussion. Bring a trumpet. Bring a saxophone. Bring your dancing feet, because Drums of Mosiah are going to beat in a Brixton Windrush Square on the 17th of Mosiah, August, from 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. Yes, indeed, brothers and sisters, we're going to take over Brixton Square and chant and drum in the name of Marcus Mosiah Garvey. Yeah, it says open house. Bring your drum and come. Bring any percussion and come. If you and una drum, bring your dancing feet, and we're gonna, what I'm saying, elevate our ancestors and ourselves in the process, brothers and sisters. So do stay tuned for more information on all of these things. So let's get into the movements today, brothers and sisters. And I've invited one brother to come join me for today, and I'm going to bring him through in a second. So all tight, yeah. But I wanna a couple of days ago, yeah, we observed the anniversary of the independence of the nation which is in the heart of Mama Africa, which is referred to today as the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Yeah. And as many of you will know, founding father of the Congo, Papa Patrice Lumumba, was assassinated by a conspiracy of French, Belgian, American forces with the tacit complicity of the United Nations and the British government. 6 months later, in the year 1961, in the month of January, brothers and sisters, and he was taken out because he refused to be a lackey, a puppet, and an agent of white power and Western imperialism in the Congo. And there are many apologists of white power and Western imperialism who fail to recognize and actively diminish the significance of the work and the legacy of Papa Patrice Lumumba, because they are apologists for white power and Western imperialism, brothers and sisters. But I want to read some words from our dear ancestor, our great ancestor, our ancestor who paid the ultimate sacrifice for you and for I, in setting the tone for our conversation today, or at least the conversation that I will be raising today, brothers and sisters. And Papa Patrice Lumumba said these words. He says, Africa will tell the West that today it desires the rehabilitation of Africa, a return to the roots, a revalorization of moral values. Africa will have no blocks as you have in Europe. Instead, there will be active African solidarity. The government of the Congo is a nationalist government that doesn't want imported ideologies, but which demands nothing but the total, complete liberation of the Congo. We have absolutely no intention of letting ourselves be guided by any foreign ideologies whatsoever. We have our own ideology, a strong, noble ideology, which is the affirmation of the African personality, brothers and sisters. The affirmation of the African personality. And so Papa Patrice Lumumba is making it clear that the principle of nationalism that he's standing on is not simply about nationality, i.e., being a citizen of the state. That nationalism, as he is defining it, and as he is encouraging us to consider it, is about the affirmation of the African personality in all areas of people activity, brothers and sisters. That means that our political economic ideology, as he says, we don't want to import it from foreign nations. We want to develop ideologies out of our own African personality. Last week, I began with the words of the most honorable Marcus Mosiah Garvey, where he says, we are living in a civilization that is highly developed. We are living in a world that is scientifically arranged, in which everything done by those who control is done through system, proper arrangement, proper organization. And among some of the organized methods used to control the world is the thing known and called propaganda. Propaganda has done more to defeat the good intentions of the races and nations than even open warfare. Propaganda is a method or medium used by organized people to convert others against their will. We of the Negro race are suffering more than any other race in the world from propaganda. Propaganda to destroy our hopes, our ambitions, and our confidence in ourselves. Why have I opened with those two reasons, brothers and sisters? Because Papa Patrice Lumumba is encouraging us to have the confidence to affirm and develop political economy as an affirmation of our African personality. Papa Garvey is guarding us against the fact that there is propaganda out there in the world that is organized for the purpose of discouraging us from doing just that. That tells us that we can't develop political economy as an affirmation of our African personality. That we can only be capable, brothers and sisters, that it is only possible to define reality according to the paradigms of white people and white culture. And anything that doesn't define reality in such terms doesn't exist. And even deeper, when we get into the reasoning, that there's a particular expression of white power that exists in today's world, which is Western white power, that dominates global political economy. And for a while, Western white power was in war and conflict with Eastern white power, and Western white power won. And so Western white power now seeks to define reality in ways that you are either with Western white power or you are against Western white power. And to be against Western white power is to be, to one degree or another, with Eastern white power. Because wherever you are dealing with, you must exist within the confines and paradigms of Bakramasa, Muzungu, Oyibo, Obruni, Mundele power. Brothers and sisters, that them depon. And so we're going to discuss the capitalism versus socialism trap. Because there was so much debate taking place along these lines. Most of it being advocated by Western white power and students, advocates, agents, minions, peons, serfs, and knights, soldiers in the army of Western white power that seek to impose this debate on African people in such a way as we are not allowed to move beyond its paradigms, to move beyond its constraints. Yeah? And so what we're going to use as our study material for today, brothers and sisters, bear with me, because we're going to go through some things. I want to evoke one of my greatest influences in life. Yes, indeed, brothers and sisters, a man by the name of Baba Chinwezu. Yeah, Baba Chinwezu. I read his book, Decolonizing the African Mind, as a teenager. And every now and then I just have to come back to it and read it again, because it had a great impact upon me as a teenager. I was definitely before 16 when I read that book, yeah? And so as a political scientist, Baba Chinwezu is one of my greatest influences. And he has essay entitled Socialism or Communalism. Socialism or Communalism. Now, I have some minor differences with my elder, Baba, in terms of what he says in this piece. And when I say minor, they're very minor, but I'll explain them as I go through. But his general sensibility here, I wholeheartedly embrace. And let's explore the dynamics here. Socialism or communalism, brothers and sisters. Yeah. Several African leaders of the independence generation advocated or implemented what they called socialism. Professor Pra, that's Baba Kwesi Pra, who you would have heard me mention many times before, reports that by the mid-1960s, practically all African heads of state, with the exception of Haile Selassie of Ethiopia, Leon Mba of Gabon, and V.S. Tubman of Liberia, had at one time or another espoused African socialism. Yeah. Now, this particular statement, when I first read it, I disagreed with it, but then I read it again and I thought, okay, maybe there's some truth to this. Yeah. The reason why I disagreed with it is because he talked about African leaders adopting socialism, and I'm quite clear that the majority of African leaders after in the independence era did not adopt socialism, yeah, or implement socialist policies within their nation. But he says here, espoused, yes, espoused, okay. And so in that regard, as I think Elder Cecil said the last time he was on, there were many who espoused socialism in various different degrees, but did nothing, yeah, in relation to its implementation. And many, and of those who did espouse socialism and tried to implement it, most of their projects, yeah, ended very quickly. I would argue that the two that lasted the longest were Sekou Touré in Guinea and Julius Nyerere in Tanzania. All right, but that's a minor point. It's not particularly germane to where we're going to go with this conversation. Yeah, well, we can discuss it if you so wish. And there are many who would like to discuss that, because the propaganda today is that all of the leaders adopted socialism, and apparently you hear some propaganda out there today that apparently Africa, as the entire continent, has been implementing socialist policies on the African continent for the last 60, 70 years, brothers and sisters. Yeah. Nobody who actually says this seems to be able to substantiate it in any clear terms. I would like to hear that. If anybody can substantiate that claim for me today, please let me know how the entire continent of Africa has been running off of socialist policies for the last 70, 60 years. I'd appreciate some substantiation on that point. Consistently, such ideologies have put a distance, listen carefully now, consistently, such ideologies have put a distance between what they variously define as African socialism and 20th century Marxian socialist formulae, with the emphasis on class struggle. Once again, consistently, such ideologues have put a distance between what they variously define as African socialism and 20th century Marxian socialist formulae, with an emphasis on class struggle. And so what happens is, because in Western propaganda, Marxist is a derisive terminology. It's even a slur, yeah. Like even on this on these platforms, yeah, when people like to use the term Marxist as a slur, right? You know what I'm saying, for ones and ones, yeah, contemporary and historical, yeah. That's because they're inheriting a tradition, yeah, a Western imperialist tradition that characterizes Marxism in a particular kind of way in the interest of white Western power. Yeah. And so anything that claims socialism, they conflate it completely and absolutely with Marxism and Karl Marx. And what Baba Chinwezu is saying is that there are those who use the term and define concepts of African socialism that were actively putting a distance between themselves, what they were defining and promoting, and Marxian socialist politics of the 20th century. And by that, what he's referring to specifically is Russia, Soviet Russia in particular, and to a slightly lesser extent, China. And why I say to a slightly lesser extent is because China was also doing the same thing. Yeah, you know, they were creating a distance between themselves and classical Marxism, so to speak. Right? Then he goes on to quote Tom Mboya. Tom Mboya anchored his definition of African socialism on the pre-industrial communitarian ethos of Africa in Tanzania under Julius Nyerere. Populist socialism was described as Ujamaa socialism. The African socialism, quote unquote, African socialism, this is what Baba Chinwezi is saying now, of many of these leaders was a prestigious misnomer for African communalism. Yeah. So Baba Chinwezi is actually challenging the designation of African socialism now. He's saying that what they were calling African socialism, what they were trying to call African socialism, was in fact African communalism. All right. Sorry, brothers and sisters, making sure my technicalities are in tune over here. So, all right. All on there. Something not right. All right, something not right. Hold on. Okay, that's better. All right, brothers and sisters, let's get back into the thing. This is a conversation for those who are seriously concerned about the development of African-centered political economy. Yeah. Now, there are those who are not concerned with that. There are those who are happy existing within white power frameworks. This conversation is not for you. Okay. All right. Here is Tom Mboya's exposition of it. He is quite representative of expositions of Nyerere, Kaunda, Senghor, Mamadou Dia, etc. And those are various different leaders within Africa during the independence period. Mboya says, in Africa, the belief that we are all sons and daughters of the soil has always exercised tremendous influence on our social, economic, and political relationships. From this belief springs the logic and the practice of equality and the acceptance of communal ownership of the vital means of life, the land. The whole is to us the symbol of work. Every able-bodied man, woman, girl, and boy has always worked. Laziness has not been tolerated, and appropriate social sanctions have developed against it. There has been equality of opportunity for everyone had land, or rather the use of land, and a whole to start life. So basically what Mboya is saying is that within indigenous African social order, therefore economic order, land was inalienable. Everybody had access to land, and as a part of the communal order, the community would develop the tools and grant the tools to be able to work the land as a part of the social and economic system. Yeah. There has been, the acquisitive instinct, which is largely responsible for the vicious accesses and exploitation under the capitalist system, was tempered by a sense of togetherness and a rejection of graft and meanness. Let me read that part again. The acquisitive instinct, which is largely responsible for the vicious excesses and exploitation under the capitalist system, was tempered by a sense of togetherness and a rejection of graft and meanness. There was loyalty to the society, and the society gave its members much in turn, a sense of security and universal hospitality. These are the values for which, in my view, African socialism stands. The ideals and attitudes which nourish it are indigenous and are easily learnt. Once again, the ideals and attitudes which nourish it are indigenous and are easily learnt, for they have been expressed for generations in the language of the soil which our people understand, and not in foreign slogans. Once again, they have been expressed for generations in the language of the soil which our people understand, and not in foreign slogans. Yeah, one of them might be "Workers of the world, unite and fight." Yeah, foreign slogan. That's not what we're talking about here. All right. All African leaders who have written on this subject are agreed on these points. President Nyerere has said, quote, "My fellow countrymen can understand socialism only as cooperation." And President Senghor of Senegal, speaking at the Dakar conference in December of 1962 on the roads to socialism, said, "Socialism is the merciless fight against social dishonesties and injustices, fraudulent conversion of public funds, rackets and bribes," unquote. I have, I hope, given some idea already of the reason why Africans call these attitudes African socialism and not just socialism. There is a positive desire arising out of what may start as a negative reaction that whatever is of value in our own culture and her own social institutions should be brought out to contribute to the creation of the new African nation. I wrote earlier about the task of reconstructing the economy in the days after independence. In the effort to do this, new rules have to be established in place of colonial values. And we have to decide what part of the traditional African social and cultural structure can play in the country's economic development. Point to note here is that when he talks about the colonial values are white Western colonial values, and the economic system of white Western colonial nations and agents of said nations is capitalism, was and remains capitalism. And so they were looking for ideals, values that were contrary to the colonial governance system, the colonial economic system, and the colonial social system, brothers and sisters. Yeah, that was the intentionality of what Mboya is expressing here. And so they were turning to their own culture, our own culture, in order to find and affirm these values. Yeah, it's very important to know this now. Follow the train of logic here. Baba Chingwezu is still quoting Tom Mboya at this point. Its main difference from European structure, which was, of course, the one officially favored during the colonial era, is that it is communal by nature. Most African tribes, and we don't use the term tribes today, but we're going to read exactly the words as they are. Have a I should explain that we don't use the word tribe because we understand it to be a colonial terminology and a degrading colonial terminology that is designed to infantilize African indigenous social order. All right. Infantilize and demonize, African indigenous social order. Most African tribes, we would say nations, have a communal approach to life. A person is an individual only to the extent that he is a member of a clan, a community, or a family. Land is never owned by an individual, but by the people, and could not be disposed of by anybody. Where there were traditional heads, they held land in trust for the community generally. Food grown on the land was regarded as food to feed the hungry among the tribe nation. Although each family might have its own piece of land on which to cultivate, when there was famine or when someone simply wanted to eat, he merely looked for food and ate it. When money was introduced, when money was introduced, the African came to work for wages, but he still maintained contact with his native land as the only source of security to which he could look in old age or in sickness. He was secure in his mind that he could go back to his home and be taken care of by his people. It was a social security scheme. I'm going to skip pieces of this, because I think it's made the point. The practice of African socialism involves trying to use what is relevant and good in these customs to create new values in a changing world of the money economy. So we're not just taking what is old and African and superimposing it on a current reality without consideration. The practice of African socialism, as Mboya is defining it, involves trying to use what is relevant and good in these African customs to create new values. This is a creative process. in the changing world of the money economy to build an economy which reflects the thinking of the great majority of the people. The challenge of African socialism is to use these traditions to find a way to build a society in which there is a place for everybody, where everybody shares both in poverty and in prosperity, and where emphasis is placed upon production by everyone with security for all. In his booklet, Ujamaa, The Basis of African Socialism, Julius Nyerere brings out clearly the essential difference of African from European socialism. He writes, the foundation and objective, this is Nyerere now, the foundation and objective of African socialism is the extended family. The true African socialist does not look on one class of men as his brethren and another as his natural enemies. He does not form an alliance with the brethren for the extermination of the non-brethren. He rather regards all men as his brethren, as members of his ever-extending family. Ujamaa, then, or familyhood, describes our socialism. It is opposed to capitalism, which seeks to build a happy society on the basis of the exploitation of man by man. It is equally opposed to doctrinaire socialism, which seeks to build its happy society on a philosophy of inevitable conflict between man and man. Yeah. So this is Nyerere now challenging the foundations of Marxian doctrine, which is class struggle. Yeah. Class struggle. And within the context of Marxian doctrine, it is not that class struggle simply exists. It is that class struggle is fundamental, inevitable, yeah, right? And can't be done away with, right? So your class within society is your most fundamental identity and therefore represents your eternal interest. Yeah? All right? And Nyerere is distancing himself and what he's defining as African socialism from that particular dynamic. Yeah? Simply saying that African socialism, as he's defining it, is just based upon our relationship, our social relationship as a community of people and an ever-extending community of people. That's the sensibility governing what he's talking about, yeah? And so that's where Baba Chinwezu ends the quote from, the very long quote from Tom Mboya. All right? So he's explained all of that. Now, he's going to go on to critique the Osaje for Kwame Nkrumah. And those who have read Baba Chinwezu significantly will know that he's a very heavy critique of Osaje for Kwame Nkrumah. Many of his critiques I agree with. Some of them I have a slight difference of opinion or emphasis. And either way, though, I tend to have a bit more regard for the legacy and the work of Nkrumah than Baba Chinwezu does. Having said that, his critiques of Nkrumah are worthy of being heard, and I encourage brothers and sisters to engage with them properly. Yeah, all right, properly and fundamentally. Nkrumah differed from all the others. Now, listen to this. This is Baba Chinwezu speaking now. Yes, Nkrumah, a self-declared Marxist, which is true, espoused Marxism, which is also known as scientific socialism. So Baba Chinwezu now is explaining the differences between some of the dynamics that even existed on the African continent, yeah? And more often than not, brothers and sisters, when you hear brothers and sisters and others, and more often than not, the brothers and sisters are getting their talking points from the others who talk about socialism in Africa, they will never engage these nuances. They will never engage the complexities of what was actually taking place. So we're going to get a snapshot of those complexities today. And fire for this honesty. And propaganda that is designed to be against the interests of African people. He declared Pan-Africanism, that's Nkrumah, and socialism are organically complementary. One cannot be achieved without the other. It is claimed. Is that claim true? Yeah, and by the way, Nkrumah said that in his book Revolutionary Path. Baba Chimwezu asked, is that claim true? Nkrumah merely asserted but did not bother to demonstrate this dogma of his. Unfortunately, it is false as his many fallacious claims about what, quote, only a continental union government could, unquote, could achieve for Africans. It is like his opportunistic and Canute-like nonsense that if in the past the Sahara divided us, now it unites us. And Baba Chinwezu is attacking Nkrumah's what he calls continentalist inclination, which is the idea and the preoccupation with uniting Africa as it is, without regard for Arab imperialism in the north of Africa. Yeah, heavy critic, and a very, very accurate critic, in my humble estimation, of that particular policy and that particular trajectory. All right. Marxism, scientific socialism, has as much organic or historical or cultural connection with Africa as Hinduism, Taoism, Shinto. Marxism in Africa, just like Christianity, is an alien imperialist import for either of them to be organically connected to Pan-Africanism. European cultural imperialism would have to be organically connected to Africa, which is not the case. Let me read that line again. Marxism in Africa, just like Christianity, is an alien imperialist import. For either of them to be organically connected to Pan-Africanism, European cultural imperialism would have to be organically connected to Africa, which is not the case. As that's Professor Kwesi Pra, pointedly asked, quote, what is the relevance of scientific socialism to the notion of African unity? If it has no relevance to the objectives of Pan-Africanism or to African history and culture, how can it be correctly said to be organically complementary to Pan-Africanism? That Nkrumah was both a Pan-Africanist and a Marxist is only a fortuitous coincidence in his intellectual life. It does not make Pan-Africanism and Marxism organically related in any way. Yeah, and note the use of the terms here, such as organically. All right. Furthermore, Aikwe Amar has argued correctly, in my view, that Marxism, in its approach to non-Western societies and values, is decidedly colonialist, Western, Eurocentric, hegemonist. Once again, Marxism, in its approach to non-Western societies and values, is decidedly colonialist, Western, Eurocentric, and hegemonist. And not to go into this right now, but anybody who studies the history of the USSR, the Soviet Union, in relation to African people, will be born to be true. Anybody who studies labor movements and the Communist Party and the Workers' Party and so on and so forth in places like Britain and America would be aware, and the fact of the inherent white supremacist inclinations of Marxian movements and communist movements would bear itself to be absolutely apparent, yeah, within the study of that history. Marxism, in its approach to non-Western majority of the world's peoples, is demonstrably racist in a prejudiced, determined, dishonest, unintelligent fashion. Western racists hold that Western art is art, but African art is primitive art. What makes Western art civilized and modern is that it originates in the West. What makes African art primitive is that it originates in Africa. Racism is luxuriously illogical. That is partly why, for Marx and Engels, communism is modern, civilized, and serious when it appears in Europe, even if it has only a spectral form. The same communist phenomenon, when it manifests in the non-Western world, is dismissed as primitive communism, even though it appears there not as a fuzzy liberal spectre, but in human form, vigorous, pushing toward birth in societies familiar for ages with communism as a lost tradition and a real hope, often aborted, sometimes fleetingly realized. Yeah. And it's got a reference there, Marx and Marx, pages 41 to 42. I'm going to move quickly because we're nearly at the point that I want to make here. All right. Since Pan-Africanism is anti-racist, anti-colonialist, and anti-Eurocentric. Yeah. Now, I want to point this out. When brothers and sisters who have molded themselves into intellectual agents of Western white power have difficulty with the fact that we, some of us, as Pan-Africanists, African-centered folks, inclined folks, reject capitalism, what they have difficulty dealing with is this element of our Pan-African inclination. That is, it's on the one hand anti-racist, anti-colonialist, and Eurocentric. And in as much as we critique the Eurocentricity of Marxism and communism within that context, we also apply the terms like racist, colonialist, neocolonialist, and Eurocentric to capitalism. And they would rather us challenge the Eurocentricity of Marxism and communism in defense of capitalism. That's the problem that they're having. And because it is well developed within the Western framework, within Western political economy and propaganda, to weaponize the Marxist label to identify and therefore apply corporate and state machinery against said enemies, they seek now to put the African-centered framework and impose it, the Marxism upon it, for the sake of defending their capitalist masters. Yeah? All right. Yeah? Let's go forward in the reading. Since Pan-Africanism is anti-racist, anti-colonialist, and anti-Eurocentric, Nkrumah cannot be correct in claiming that Pan-Africanism and a racist, colonialist, and Eurocentric Marxism, aka scientific socialism, are organically contemporary and that one cannot be achieved without the other. That is tantamount to claiming that anti-racism and racism, anti-colonialism and colonialism, anti-Eurocentrism and Eurocentrism must be achieved together in Africa. In contrast to Nkrumah's scientific socialism, the African socialism of other leaders is derived from African communalism and therefore has a historical and organic link to African culture. Now, what is he explaining here? Because I don't want to just talk. I want to make sure that I'm bringing people along with me in terms of what I'm reading here. Last week, I critiqued Nkrumah and said that one of the mistakes I believe that Nkrumah made was on the ideological front, that he attempted to define socialism as universal and thereby being scientific and applying to all peoples under all circumstances in all parts of the world. Yes. And so what Papa Chinwezu is explaining here is that in contrast to Nkrumah, there were others who were defining a specific African expression that they called African socialism, that they didn't consider socialism as defined by Marx and as defined by Lenin and as defined by Trotsky and as defined by Engels to be universal and scientific. Yeah, they were challenging the Marxian dogma that had been imposed upon the world in the fight between capitalism versus communism as political economic systems. Yeah. So, but Chinwezu is critiquing Nkrumah and saying that he was different. Now, whilst I think this is my somewhat critique of Baba Chinwezu, whilst I think that he is correct in his analysis, yeah, on Nkrumah's ideological mistake, I also think that he gives a little bit too much credit, yeah, to some of the others who would have contributed to the definition of African socialism, but in actual practice, their philosophy, no, their actual economic policy was thoroughly neo-colonial, right? But that's another subject for another time, yeah? Another subject for another time. He goes on, as Nyerere explained, by the use of the word ujamaa, therefore, we state that for us, socialism involves building on the foundation of our past and building also to our own design. We are not importing foreign ideology into Tanzania and trying to smother our distinct social patterns with it. We have deliberately decided to grow as a society out of our own roots, but in a particular direction and towards a particular kind of objective. We are doing this by emphasizing certain characteristics of our traditional organization and extending them. How dare you? How dare we as African people emphasize certain characteristics of our own traditional organization and extend them so that they can embrace the possibilities of modern technology and enable us to meet the challenges of life in the 20th century world? How dare we do that, brothers and sisters? How dare we do that as opposed to aligning ourselves with Bakra, Mozungo, Oyibo, or Bruni completely, irrevocably, and become their soldiers? Not have a amicable relationship of equals at the table. No. Why? How dare we assert ourselves rather than make ourselves subordinate to America and Britain in particular in these instances? And also, yes, Russia and China and well, let's leave China out of it for a second because they're not in the white world. Let's do the white world for a second. How dare the African feel the kind of confidence within him and herself to develop his own political and ideological and economic philosophy and policy and try to institute that? How dare you, uppity African in this day and age? Nkrumah would have done well, Baba Chinwezi was saying, to follow Nyerere and heed Azikwe's Nandi Azikwe of Nigeria wise counsel on ideologies. Quote, it is obligatory for us to adopt a tolerant skepticism in respect of alien ideologies and then examine impartially our aboriginal law of good living. If we react otherwise, then we would be desecrating the legacy which our forebears had bequeathed to us from past generations. Unquote. That's the end of the quote from Nnamdi Azikiwe. Baba Chinwezi continues, we need to note that both capitalism and socialism, listen carefully to this now, we need to note, brothers and sisters, that both capitalism and socialism, both capitalism and socialism, both capitalism and socialism are ideologies made in Europe to solve the peculiar problems of a modern European society in which two antagonistic classes confront each other, one having seized all society's means of production, leaving the other with only its labor to sell to live. Yeah? So there he's talking about what the capitalism and what brought communism into being, which was, as he has defined it, two antagonistic classes confronting each other. One having the capitalist class, having seized all the society's means of production, leaving the other with only its labor to sell to live. Unless and until that situation is replicated in Africa, unless and until that situation is replicated in Africa, and that would be a disaster, these rival ideologies will remain inappropriate in Africa. Capitalism and socialism will remain inappropriate in Africa. After, I'm reading this because I want people to understand that these thoughts and ideals exist within the Pan-African space. And the dishonesty of a lot of conversations is that you will never know that these sensibilities exist. After all, theories about the camel's way of life should not be applied to the whales. It should be pointed out that the ancestral political economy combined private ownership with communal ownership, as Kaunda described it. Quote, our ancestors worked collectively and cooperatively from start to finish. One might say this was communist. This was a communist way of doing things, and yet these gardens remain strongly the property of individuals. One might say here that when it comes to one might say here that this was capitalism. Collectively and cooperatively, they harvested, but when it came to sorting out and selling their produce, they became strongly individualistic. They did not finish at that. When it came to sharing the fruits of their labor, like meals, for instance, they shared them communally. Indeed, one is compelled to say a strange mixture of 19th century capitalism with communism. Yet, as is said above, this was the original and the pattern essentially African. That's Kaunda. Now, I disagree with some of Kaunda's language there, and assessments, but that's what Kaunda said. Yeah. I should say I have some nuances, yeah? But the essential part I don't disagree with. All right? So Baba Chinwezu continues. This is the last section I'm going to read now. African socialism or African communalism. You would have heard me say, brothers and sisters, that my economic philosophy at an ideological level is fundamentally communitarian, communalistic, collectivist, yeah, in its inclinations, yeah, in its foundations, in its predominance. All right. Why did these African leaders choose a tag, African socialism? Now, Baba Chinwezu is going to critique the term African socialism now. For what was actually African communalism? Why did these African leaders choose the tag African socialism for what was actually African communalism? I suspect that in the global climate of the 1960s, which was dominated by the intra-European Cold War, they found it prestigious to attach a European label to their African-derived political ideology, hence the socialism. But they also needed to distinguish their ideology from European socialism, hence the African in the name. But I think that the time is past when we should seek to embrace the value of something African by making it seem a variant of something European. Notice where the man has gone with the argument here. I think the time has passed when we should seek to enhance the value of something African by making it seem a variant of something European. Our intellectual independence requires that we name things correctly and on our own terms. I will therefore use the term African communalism henceforth to describe what has been called African socialism. He names the leaders, them, and the rest of them began the process of formulating an ideology. Point here. We need to be confident about being a part of a process. The propaganda of the white world, capitalist and communist, is that thing is fixed, unchanging, like the laws of Moses, yeah, and complete from time immemorial until now, and not a nogosa, brothers and sisters. Yeah. So we need to be confident about the fact that this is our particular stage of development. This is what we need to do at this particular stage of development. And once we have reached a new stage of development, we will evolve to meet those new challenges, brothers and sisters. Yes, let us be understanding that the rest of them began the process of formulating an ideology for building a political economy that would put in modern form the pre-colonial African political economy of agrarian communalism. The project remains uncompleted and should be continued from where these pioneers left off. That means that we're not even taking what Nyerere said, and just bringing it forward. We're going to consider it, correct what was incorrect. And the good thing about that one is, even Nyerere, declared where he was incorrect. And Nkrumah did the same, was prone to self-critique in many ways. African political economy, the project remains uncompleted and should be continued from where these pioneers left off. The challenge to work out an industrial upgrade of pre-colonial African communalism is before our intellectuals and should be taken up. The project remains the challenge to work out an industrial upgrade of pre-colonial African communalism is before our intellectuals and should be taken up. I'm skipping the quote here. He said, we should invite our students and academics to take up the challenge and provide us with the much needed industrial communalist ideology and thereby give us a framework of ideas with which to solve our problems, with which to define and pursue our interest in the world. I'm going to skip a couple paragraphs again. For the benefit of those who take up the challenge, let me stress that they should conceptualize our situation in a comprehensive way so that the ideology they come up with can help solve our problems comprehensively. Unlike Nyerere, Kaunda, and Co. Now he's going to critique Nyerere, Kaunda, and Co., who were trying to work out a communalist system, but who did not explicitly impose on their system the conditions for defending it in the world as it is today. Those who set out to fashion a neo-communalist system would do well to consciously design it so that it can achieve the black power necessary to protect it in this century. This is an essential point because what happens is all of these brothers and sisters, elders and ancestors were under attack from the greatest colonial and neo-colonial forces of the world. And all of their mistakes, because yes, they made mistakes, were exacerbated and sometimes mischievously created within the context of said warfare, brothers and sisters. And the fact that we lost a lot of those battles is used as a point to negate and reject and not even to consider what they did. So you would think that Nyerere, even though he made his mistakes, never achieved anything. Now, I should say, not only made mistakes, but never achieved anything that is of value, that is worth note. Yes? That Nkrumah, with all his mistakes, only had mistakes and failures to his name and never did anything of worth, of value, or achieved anything that we need to look at. That is the propaganda. The propaganda is designed to get us to completely reject Nkrumah and pick up white lords and saviors in the economic realm. But Baba Chinwezu is saying they didn't impose a system whereby they were able to protect what they were doing sufficiently, and therefore it was attacked and succumbed to that attack. And so one of the lessons that we need to learn is that we need to have a defense mechanism for the achievements that we are making. And in making those achievements, we will make new mistakes. But a powerful people, are not only able to protect their achievements, but are able to protect their mistakes from foreign intrigue. And that is what the white world is very good at doing. They make mistakes all the time. For them system, always a crash. But they're able to protect their mistakes and pass off their mistakes as continued success. And some of us are licky and lucky and follow them like dog with tail between leg and all these things. I'm there, brothers and sisters. Those who set out to fashion a neo-communalist system would do well to consciously design it so that it can achieve the black power necessary to protect it in this century. The mix of principles of ownership of the land and other means of production must be consciously such as to allow the setting up of giant industries. In principle, there should be no reason why a giant industry should not be communally owned by an entire village or town. Modes of ownership by communities should be invented to supplement and complement individual ownership. In addition, there is much to be learnt from the industrialized systems of Sweden and Japan and from pre-colonial Ashanti. According to Professor Apoku Ajeman, collectivism is the dominant impulse in Sweden in the sense that the system emphasizes the sovereignty of collective well-being over individual private interests. In Japan, where society is similarly conceived in corporate terms, individuals are seen to benefit only through the elevation of the group as a whole. In Ashanti, the welfare of the national society was placed well above calculations of the individual self-interest and self-indulgence. Ajeman continues, the logic of the Japanese capitalist system places a heavy reliance on the private market, and yet Japan's market economy is not based on Adam Smith's notion that a society benefits from the liberation of individual greed, each person seeking his own self-interest. In socialist, quote-unquote, Sweden, the government's role has been to foster social uses of ownership, which is overwhelmingly private, to ensure the sovereignty of society's interests over private interests. In mercantilist, quote-unquote, Ashanti, even though the public sector loomed larger than the private, no rigid antipathy to private enterprise existed. On the contrary, the private sector was nurtured by the state to generate wealth through the fostering of a breed of private entrepreneurs. Socially responsible uses of the ownership and means of production, private or public, is a demonstrable value in all three cases. In Sweden, while it is acceptable for a private owner of industry to create a fortune, this is conditional on the wealth being used in socially useful ways. In Japan, the private sector exudes social responsibility through a corporate socialism that confers such benefits as lifetime employment and egalitarian job practices. In Ashanti, private acquisition of wealth was encouraged, but on a condition that the riches were obtained by honest means and hard work and could be relied upon by the system for pecuniary assistance. The great challenge facing African thinkers, I'm sorry, I've read all that because I wasn't going to read it, but I've read all of that to emphasize that he's not even saying that we shouldn't learn, as I said many times on this platform, that we can't learn from other people, but that we don't superimpose their reality on ours as if it's going to solve our problems, yes, holistically, yeah, that it must be based upon our own indigenous systems, and that if other people are more advanced than us in this area, that we can learn some lessons from them, study them. And what applies to us, we can apply it to us. Yeah, so the thing go. The great challenge facing African thinkers, whether or not they are also political leaders, is to fashion an industrial communalist ideology, is to fashion a what? Industrial communalist ideology to guide the political economy of an industrialized black superpower. In this task, they have much to learn from case studies in pre-colonial African countries like the Ashanti and Zulu, and also from non-African countries like modern Japan, Sweden, Cuba, and China, brothers and sisters. All right, I've been speaking for a hot minute. We're going to open up the lines now. Brother Sekou. Brother Sekou, when you're ready, let me know. All right. Okay. Let me ring through the.
Notes.
Go, brother Sekou, you're there. How are you, my brother?
Yeah, I'm good, man. Good to see you. It's been a little while. I've been.
Yes, sir. Yeah,
yes, sir. How are you doing?
I'm good. I know you've been busy, you know what I'm saying? And congratulations on your graduation in terms of your education. You know what I'm saying? Also, it was last week, but still happy belated birthday.
Yeah, thank you so much, bro.
You know what I'm saying? You know,
yeah.
And all of these things. But yeah, give me your reflection on the very long reading that I've just done.
Yes, thank you for this great masterclass. I would say that you just did for us, and it's a free course. I think we need to pay for this course, but you gave it to us free, and it's a very, very interesting stuff that you said. Yes, my opinion on that, I think you've discussed this topic several times on this channel, but I see our brother Kofi continues to push this propaganda aspect of this whole discussion. So here's the way I look at it from yesterday's discussion, where the brother said we're African traditional economic system socialist. Then he go ahead and say no. Then when we get into the discussion, then we say now, okay, define socialism and now define African economic, pre-colonial economic system. Then you struggle because it's not a yes or no issue, because the fact that you even ask the question, the fact that you even ask that question make us now to think that we are dealing with thought by proxy. This thought by proxy is in all African educated African elite who think that we must always address the African issue from the perspective of the European or the Arabs, the boxes that they've created for us. Okay, so for example, you will see whether you belong to a religion or you are a pagan. That's the way they see the world. It's either you are a believer or you are an unbeliever. It's either you are civilized or uncivilized. Either you are socialist or capitalist. Either you are Democrat or authoritarian. You are secular or theocratic. So we are saying that when we look back at our classical economic system and culture, that you cannot put us in these boxes. So the African intellectual must stop being lazy. He must wake his butt up and actually look at the thing holistically. How did our ancestors do this? Stop being lazy. Because by the time you put us in these boxes, you don't want to think. That's why you're doing that. You don't want to think. So when you look at African literature, when you look at, for example, Things Fall Apart by our great ancestor, Chinua Achebe, we see the character, it's a fiction, of course. It's a fiction of him, but he used that to expose what has happened in the pre-colonial time versus when African came in contact with European culture. The character he used there, Okonkwo. Okonkwo was saying, they say our custom is bad, our culture is bad. But how do they even know it? They don't even speak our language. They don't even understand the system we operate in. But the most painful part is that our brothers have joined them. Our brothers have joined them to say our customs is bad. That's what made the fight very difficult. They don't even know our law on issue of land. They don't even understand how our law works. But our brothers have joined them, so they have decided to criticize our own customs and our culture. You see, when it comes to the issue of capitalism and socialism, we say that we don't belong to neither of these things. But we must understand the context in which Kwame Nkrumah and Nyerere were operating, the Cold War era.
That's it. That's right.
In that context, the capitalists were the enemies of Africa. That's the fact, and they still are. They were exploiting. Remember, the colonialists who came to Africa, they were using the name philanthropist. That's why the colonialists who were coming into Africa to exploit and steal, they came under the banner of what they call philanthropist. And in the Negro Christianity, Islam, and Negro race, our great ancestor who was in Liberia, who wrote that book, he tells us, Edward William Blyden tells us how these people were coming in in the name of commerce and trade, but in reality, it was all about exploitation. They were not into any equal business to say open market or it's about free market. No, they were there to exploit. That's what capitalism does. It is to exploit the people, because some of the things they use is about free market, it's about competition. Yeah, it's just a religion say we are for peace and we are for this, but in reality, religion is to kill people.
Right.
So the slogan is we are for peace. But when we look at capitalism, where did the European get the capital of their capitalist system? It was out of slavery. It was from the slave trade that they got their primitive capital. Okay, so we cannot take all these ideology and just jump into them. Let's look at our system. The African system is holistic. We did have free market system. Yes, we did. But major things like land, which is very important to production, was owned by the community. This is the way our ancestors started. So from there, we start seeing how our ancestors do strategic asset in the country was owned by the people. You don't give that out there. So they were very strategic in how they were doing their things. That's why there were no homelessness. What people say poverty, Africa didn't know poverty. Until capitalism, Africa did not know poverty until the capitalists came. Okay. And now,
I was going to say the primary reason for that is the inalienability of land. Yeah, so it's almost impossible to be poor when you have access to the means to feed, clothe, and shelter yourself. That is the point, right?
I grew up in the village. I grew up in the village, brother. Let me just give you my own little, because Africa, the laws that operate in the cities and the elite government is different from the villages until today. Right. Even though the villages have been deprived. They've been disconnected with resources and all of that, but they still operate. How we grew up in the village, a village of maybe you say 300 or 200 families, and then we are there. We are all farmers. What they do, each individual have a farm. The land is owned by the people who own the village. They gave you the land to farm. You can be there as many as 10, 20 years. They will give you land as far as long as you arrive as a peaceful settler, they give you a land to farm. It's not for you. Now, during this farming, every year what they do, the entire community will come together and have one big farm. Everybody will go there and work. It's not my farm. It's not your farm. We just go there and work. Okay. Then that farm, okay, those products are kept. It's for crisis. Whenever there is crisis in the village or something, they use that. Each individual family have their own farms. So what these people do, they set aside a week. They'll say, we will help Brother Shaka this week. All of us will go to his farm and help him and make sure his farm is well. He's not going to pay us. All he does is cook for us. The next following week, they say, we go to Kellett's farm. So they make sure it's a kind of communalism, like you were reading. They make sure everybody is okay. Now, one rich guy cannot come to that village and say, you know what, I'm buying off all of this land and all of you work for me. They will consider you evil. They are going to consider you evil to come and say, I'm buying up all of this land. Now you guys going to work for me and I'm going to give you peanuts. And you'll be suffering below the ladder and be working on my farm. All they were looking for is a shared prosperity. How do everybody benefit? So for me, what I want our African intellectuals to be doing, we should be thinking what economic system will be beneficial to the African people. What it would work for us based on our situation in the world today. What type of system can uplift our masses of our people out of the condition they are in, instead of continuing this propaganda? Because there's one thing I observed over the years: the European ego and the colonized African ego is quite different, because the European, they actually do not follow any system. They only follow a system that works for them at that time or what they are pursuing. They can tell you climate change as long as it benefits them. But once it goes against their interest, tomorrow they break that rule called climate change. Before Russia and Ukraine war, they were on the African neck and saying that we need to do renewable energy, we need to do this, you can't do fossil fuel. They were going after African energy sources. Now when the war started, they went back. All of them. They don't care about any accord that they signed. Even the socialism you are talking about. If it benefits Europeans tomorrow, most of them will go back to it. And
they're going to do it.
Some of them
it's true.
have gone back to it.
It's
but
true.
They call it different names now.
But different name. Yeah, it's true. It's true. They go
Canada,
back and forth between it. It's true.
Yeah. In Canada, everybody here pay for the health insurance is for everyone. You are working, you are not working. Once you're sick, everybody, we all work and pay for you. You go to the hospital and get treated. They call it universal health care, blah, blah, blah. There is housing. There is subsidized housing where the government pays for people who have certain disability or defect. There's housing for you. There's a government subsidized housing, 3-bedroom that a middle class cannot afford. They give it to you. You are not working. It's given to you. They try to make sure everybody's okay. They things like healthcare and what have you. They make sure everybody get. If you done that in the 20th century, they will have called you a socialist. If you did that in the 20th century, they will have called you a socialist. So now they've seen how important it is to have to build welfare states. They've seen how important it is for people to control land. For individuals.
I'll tell you better than that, Brother Sekou. When them ready, they will take an entire state and turn it into a welfare state if it serves their power interest, which is what is happening in Israel at the moment, right? So welfare state is a slur, but then they're able to define somehow the state that receives the most welfare of any state on the planet right about now is Israel, but Israel is never defined as a welfare state. Yeah, never. No. By the way, brothers and sisters, sorry, Brother Sekou, the link is in the chat. The link is in the chat. Feel free to click the link, come true, and raise your points. I'm gonna come back to you, Brother Sekou. Just give me a second to reiterate the call. For those who are in London and want to send materials of relief for our brothers and sisters in the Caribbean. In this particular instance, we're talking about Grenada, Carriacou, and Petit Martinique. The latter two who have been hit most by Hurricane Beryl, brothers and sisters. And so you can drop off at Mo Better Cuts in 316A, Ladbroke Grove, London W105NQ. That's Mo Better Cuts, 316 Ladbroke Grove, London, NW10 5NQ. They're looking for non-perishable foods, water, children's and adults' clothes, nappies, toiletries, including sanitary towels, and more, brothers and sisters. So feel free to drop off your relief goods at Mo Better Cuts, 316 Ladbroke Grove, London, W10 5NQ. Go ahead, Brother Sekou, complete what you was going to say.
Yeah. So I hear always people say, well, there was socialism was experimented in Africa and it failed. Kwame Nkrumah failed. Nyerere failed. I said, fail in comparison to what? Fail in comparison to what? And I am looking at, if you want to use fail as maybe one of them was toppled and then the other one maybe he made his country united and somehow Tanzania was one of the best in East Africa at the time. And what are you talking about failure? So let's go to democracy that we have today. Are you going to say also democracy and capitalism failed in Africa? Because we are the poverty headquarters of the world. We have all these democratic governments in Africa. What have they done? The Bill Gates, the Bouygues, and all of these companies in France have controlled all of Ivory Coast resources. The Ivorians own nothing. The Cocoa, the World Bank, and all of the organizations, they tell Africa not to industrialize. We continue to produce natural resources. We continue to produce natural resources, and they make sure that industrialization is delayed. How has the profit? What the capital? I'm asking you now. What is our GDP? The entire West Africa GDP, put it together, is Germany. That of Germany is bigger than it. They are all practicing capitalism. They are all practicing democracy. All of them.
No, but what they'll do when you say that is they'll find some way to define it out of capitalism, because they'll tell you that it's socialism. Somebody will tell you that it's socialism. Yeah,
where is the socialism?
Where exactly?
Let us come and tell us.
Yeah.
Let them come and tell us
all right,
which African country.
All right, maybe we'll get an answer now, brother.
Yeah,
because Coffee
let's
is here.
start with
So
Liberia.
maybe he can explain it to us.
Yeah, we will start with Liberia, saying 1847. I want to see where the socialism is in Liberia, which is one of the poorest countries in West Africa, where the open door policy of Tubman and the Firestone and all the company that came into Liberia from USA in the name of free market and exploited that country. I want to see how the capitalism has helped Liberia. I want to know.
Coffee, go ahead, brothers. This is the link is in the chat. I've seen some of you have tagged gotkushTV to ask your questions.
Let's start with Liberia, which is the oldest. Let's see how the capitalism has done there.
Go ahead, Coffee. Go ahead. If Coffee is speaking, I can't hear him.
Coffee, are you feeling cold? We are not hearing you.
Can't hear nothing. Is it just me, brothers and sisters? Can you hear Coffee? Apparently he's here and his mic is not muted. But we can't hear him. Is it just us? Is it just I and I?
Coffee, maybe you bought the wrong mic. You know, the Chinese company is maximizing profit, so they made a substandard one for you.
No, what it is, Sekou, is that the American government has put tariffs against Chinese goods. So it's more difficult, to get good Chinese microphones in the United States of America. Brothers and sisters, the link is in the chat. In fact, let me actually pin the link to the top of the chat just in case anybody else wants to come on. By the way, brothers and sisters, next week we're gonna discuss some black male-female relationships, for our Zivanai session next week. All right, so do stay tuned for that. We're going to be discussing some black male-female relation boogies, and hopefully we can have a mature conversation about some black male-female relationships. I was going to do that this week, but I shifted my trajectory somewhat to facilitate this conversation and share the works of Baba Chinwezu. But come true next week. We're gonna discuss some black male female relationship issues next week. And so I look forward to that with Ono. Right, the link is pinned to the top of the chat. Unfortunately, Sekou is not Sekou. Sorry, Coffee has not returned, brothers and sisters. So we'll await that. But in the meantime, let me get to some of the questions that were asked in the chat. Sugar Happy has said, some would still argue that an African mode of production is just socialism in their eyes. Could it be argued that big reason why African mode of production is not just socialism is because of spirituality? I wouldn't disagree with that to some degree. I think that one of the reasons why we often, from an African-centered point of view, don't apply the term socialism is because it comes with a lot of Eurocentric baggage. And so we find that it's better to use terminologies within our own paradigms that can represent more holistic expressions of our reality, if that makes sense. And I think that because a lot of what you might call African indigenous social order and therefore economic order is expressed within and what's the word? Enshrined and or preserved within spiritual systems, and how spiritual systems are organized. So, for example, if when I was in Ghana, the first time I went to Ghana in 2015, my brother Bonchi Anyete, who many of you will be familiar with, was teaching me. I was in Accra, and Accra is the founding city of the Ga, and he was educating me about the fact that traditionally among the Ga, they never had Manche and Manye, which is kings and queens. Their society was organized by the Wulome, which is their quote-unquote priesthood, for want of a better terminology. So the priest, quote-unquote, didn't just have a traditional, what you might call stereotypical spiritual role within the community. The priest had a political role, a political economic role, within the community. And so the norms and the customs of the Wulome today still in many ways reflect that role, even though the social order has shifted because of the demands of colonialism. So when the colonizer came, they wanted to speak to a king, and so that's how kings were created, among the Ga people. A similar story exists for the many of the Igbo, with the imposition of warrant chiefs and so on and so forth. So I think that there is because we are taught to look at spiritual systems as something that is separate and distinct and alien and divorced from social and economic order, we have a problem, especially if we're thinking about it from a Eurocentric point of view, and especially because Marx and Marxism has a problem appreciating cultures outside of European, and has a problem appreciating and being able to translate cultures that express themselves in spiritual terms. Then we do ourselves and our own culture a disservice when we're trying to fit our thing into this Marxist box. So I would agree with that. I don't know if you have anything to add. One more thing that came out of when Brother Sekou was speaking, which is that when we speak about the need to develop from our own cultural center, it's not just because we're vain, over-obsessed Africans who just want to speak African languages for the sake of vanity. It's because, as Brother Sekou was saying, to a significant degree, those systems still exist. So materially, if you're developing the people, you have to develop the people from where the people are at, within the context of our own culture. Yes? That is a material reality. It's not just a vain, abstract notion. Very real reality on the ground right now. Even though, as Brother Sekou has said, that a lot of the time the power dynamics and the resources have been shifted away from the indigenous communities towards the metropoles and the cities and the government, those communities are still functioning. And so if we're going to empower our indigenous communities, we have to, as a matter of just practicality and pragmatism, approach and develop from where we are at, brothers and sisters. Go ahead, Brother Sekou, if you want to answer this particular question.
Just not directly addressing this question, but kind of related. Someone asked me similar question. He said, in terms of what is spiritual laws versus secularism, where will Africans stand, an ideal African state? Will you have a theology like an Islamic state where you have Sharia, or you're going to have a secular law like European, where laws are based on our logic and our thought? I said, you see, one of the difficulties we have, and what makes Diop to stand out among his colleagues, is that he tried to say, let's self-reflect, let's go back and think, how did we build our empire? Because people think there's no other way, there's no any other method or model to follow other than that which has been laid down by the colonial masters. Let's take ancient Mali, for example, and the Kemet. The laws of Mali, ancient Mali Empire, was Sunjata Keita established. He gave 42 laws. In those 42 laws, he did not say he got a revelation from Allah giving him those laws. Do we agree? Now, from a Western perspective, that will be a secular law because it's from his thought and experience and mind. But when you study the law, there are spiritual dimension to it, where he looks at nature to be a representation of the divine, that the nature must be observed in order to create a law. Law will not be created just because we feel like it. We just feel, we just create this law. We must look at it. Does this law rhyme with nature and life? Because we are looking for harmony. We are looking for something that will preserve life and create harmony, order, and balance. So they were creating law in that context. In one way, they are not citing any divine in the sky giving them the law. In another way, also, they are not saying they can just wake up and just create the law because they feel like it. So we need to see the African holistic system, which always beat the imagination of people, that they are able to combine both secularism and the spirituality together. This is why the same thing you do with economics. They are not saying you must be socialist, extremely socialism as defined by these Europeans, or capitalist, which is a kind of a materialistic view, individualism over the collective good of everybody. which is very detrimental. Where one man now control our destiny because he said, or he got all this wealth because he's worked harder than us. Because he worked harder than us, that's why he got this wealth. Okay, so that's theory. So if America is rich today, we'll say America worked harder. That's why America is rich. We are not going to say America committed genocide against the people of that country. We are not going to say there was 500-year free labor given to America that we have to do. We will say America worked harder. Okay? So this logic is what we must avoid in the capitalist system. The glory of one man and one man fantasy above the collective. So we should stop fighting each other to say you are socialist or you are this. We should start looking at it holistically and say at what point can an individual own property and to what extent? And to what point should the society and the community own this? I think that's where the conversation needs to be elevated.
The conversation needs to go. And that is why the conversation today is called the capitalism versus socialism trap. I want to say categorically that in today's world, remember now, the Cold War, Western white power won over Eastern white power. The advocacy for capitalism, particularly in Black conscious and Pan-African spaces at this moment in time, is generally speaking an advocacy of and an allegiance, people declaring their allegiance to white power. They're declaring their allegiance to Britain and America and France. That's basically what's taking place, because alongside this advocacy of capitalism, you're going to find people challenging you for quote unquote demonizing the West. So when you call out the West in relation to matters of colonialism and neocolonialism now, you're not just speaking the truth in defense of African people, you are demonizing the West. This is coming in from people who consider themselves Black power Pan-Africanists in today's world. That you can't talk about neocolonialism because that's demonizing the West. Let me answer Trigger Happy's next question. Brothers and sisters, if you want to ask a question in the chat, you can at gotkushTV, at gotkushTV, at gotkushTV. And we're going to soon transition to at Kimbunga Media, at Kimbunga Media, at Kimbunga Media. Yeah. So do stay tuned for that transition. But you can also click the link that is pinned to the top of the chat if you want to come through live. As Brother Coffee was trying to do a minute ago, but he seems to have disappeared. He needs to speak to Trump and Biden about them banning the Chinese technology in America. Tell them to end the trade war. And maybe like get a good microphone, But what's it called? And a good computer connection. At the same time, Trigger Happy, could it also be argued that the spiritual culture of African people can help at building a more efficient communitarian system, like how many of our cultures internalize environmentalism? This is an excellent question, because it's one of the considerations that would be fundamental to African economic system. What I mean by that is, as Brother Sekou was saying, we're developing laws and custom from the intent to be harmonious with nature. Within that sensibility, nature is sacred. We sacralize nature. So when you say Oshun and Ogun and Orisha and Abosom and Nkisi and etc., we're not just talking about deities. We're talking about expressions of the sacralization of the natural environment. And because you've created paradigms, ways of thinking, that you think of the river as divine, you think of the tree as divine, you think of the soil that you plant the seed in as divine, the gazelle is divine, the lion is divine, the spider is divine. Yes, that informs now how you relate to the natural environment. So that's why that saying comes about, that land is not a commodity to be bought and sold, because human beings didn't create land. Human beings, we come to land. So we don't commodify the land. Land is not a commodity in that respect. And the difference is that when we get into these capitalism versus socialism debates, because both of those systems desacralize nature and treat nature as a commodity to be exploited, pure and simple, by human endeavor. We are now in a particular position whereby that system that has developed along those lines is trying to now correct itself by developing an environmentalist movement. Why? Because consideration for the environment is not indigenous to the culture, yes, of the people from which the economic system is born. But from our perspective, there is no economic system worth its sort that can be considered African in which consideration for the preservation and perpetuation of the natural environment is not a fundamental and central consideration. Doesn't exist. Yeah. And if you look at indigenous agricultural systems in terms of polycrop development and in terms of, you know, how land was apportioned and how land was left to, you know, replenish itself for periods of time and so on and so forth, you will see all of these economic policies that become apparent, what they call tribal custom, to infantilize it. Yeah. So yes, within our spiritual consciousness and our spiritual expression, economic principles will become apparent, even in terms of how we relate to the natural environment. I wonder if you have anything to say on this, Brother Sekou.
Yes, for me, it's very important. When I look at African spirituality, I look at nature, life, and order. These are the three ways these people look at their entire existence. So nature representing the demiurge, the whatever creator itself, whatever created the universe and us, it has expressed itself as nature, which we have met here, which is part of and produce us. So we are not trying to destroy that. We are not trying to conquer it. We are trying to see how best we can live in harmonious balance with it. And land is the number one thing. That's why land is a deity in many African culture. Land is a deity. So when a man arrives in my land, what I do is to just say, take a portion, grow your food, live here with your family, and you pay, you respect the customs and do all the necessary things, but it's not sold to you. The white man having this concept that he buy the land, it belongs to him. He owns it. It doesn't work like that. The land can be lent out, the land can be leased to you, but it does not belong to you. That one example alone establishes our economic system already. Okay? Yes. Then it's about life. The spirituality of African people is how to replicate life and take care of life. Whatever system we are going to create must always be how to preserve life and replicate life, not to suffocate. Okay? And it has to be about order, about balance and order. So for me, really, capitalism, today it look very nice. Let me tell you, it look very nice. They say there's competition, but look at it, where will it take us? Because whenever you look, you are in a car, a beautiful car is speeding. It's not about how beautiful the car is, but where is it taking you? What is the destination of this car? No matter how beautiful the car is, if I know the destination is I will end up in a ditch or somewhere in a valley, I'm going to jump out of that car. Where is capitalism driving us? Okay, that's why European capitalism can never survive without exploiting a third world country. I will repeat that for those who don't understand. European capitalism cannot survive, cannot take care of itself without a poorer country that it can exploit. Once there is no other country that it can exploit to keep its machinery running, it collapses. It collapses.
Absolutely.
It's a parasitic system. It's a parasitic system that depends on the exploitation of weaker nations. As long as you have other countries to exploit and take free natural resources, you can shout capitalism all day. But the day America stops or is unable to exploit poorer countries, it will explode.
Absolutely.
It will explode.
Absolutely.
That's why France is not trying to give up. The more territory France gave up, the weaker France becomes. Capitalism is so beautiful, it should continue to progress. Europeans' power have reduced as long as they stop they stopped exploiting many countries. That's how far their power has been. Britain was the superpower of the world when they had many territory to exploit around the world. As they stopped this territory gain independence, what happened to Britain? Britain became a shadow of itself. So this is how you need to know.
And it's still a shadow of itself.
It's still a shadow of itself. So don't never think that any of these systems are beautiful. They are parasitic systems that are usual. But our system, we're autonomous. They were systems that we built that were self-reliant. We're able to take care of each and every individual without exploiting any people, without enslaving any people. These kingdoms work. That people talk about 3,000 years. They didn't need to own colonial territories to build their system, to be able for their kings to survive. No, they only went to war to protect their borders from invaders. But they always created a system that was able to be for themselves. That's what we are saying. If the exploitation continues in science, in the pharmaceutical companies, in technology and AI, it can only lead to the destruction of humanity. I don't know why people don't see it. One man can decide tomorrow our entire fate. He can decide our entire fate tomorrow morning. One man.
Absolutely. Brothers and sisters, the issue, sorry, before I say that, let me just reiterate the call. We're probably going to wrap up soon, yeah? So if you want to come through on the panel, click the link that is pinned to the top of the chat right now. And you can also ask questions in the chat by @ing gotkushTV. Sister Mika has greeted everybody. So greetings, Sister Mika.
Sister Mika one.
And Vlad has said, you're gonna get man in trouble now. You come with them big Soviet Russian name, you know what I mean? Capitalism and socialism. I'm playing with you, Vlad. My sense of humor is special. Just to say, this is a very good conversation. Thank you very much. Thank you for that. And where in Canada is Brother Sekou at? You don't feel like you have to answer that, Brother Sekou, but you can if you want to.
Yeah. I'm in Toronto, brother. I mean, I'm around Toronto area.
All right. So Toronto's in the building, brothers and sisters. Yes, indeed. All right. A couple of things I want to point out, though, in relation to this conversation, because one of the things that is done, and by the way, yesterday, Brother Sekou made reference to a conversation that both of us were in yesterday on the Brother Search for Uhuru channel. And the brother began the show by playing a couple of videos from an economist by the name of George Aite. Yeah. And George Aite's argument is that basically socialism, all these African governments, after independence went the socialist route, and he equates socialism with state ownership of things, basically industries and institutions. Yeah. And then he went on to suggest that the only one who didn't follow that model and followed what he refers to, or what he considers to be an indigenous African model, was Botswana. Yeah. And I want to explain this for a second, because it's necessary for us to note that the propaganda of today is putting forward Botswana as the model African economy. Yeah. And it avoided the pitfalls of socialism. All right. And I want us to understand what exactly happened with Botswana. Yeah. And brothers and sisters who I otherwise respect are promoting this propaganda as well. And what I'm about to say is not even to suggest that there is nothing to learn from what Botswana did. Yeah. But it's necessary for us to understand the context of what happened in Botswana. Botswana, yeah, becomes independent in 1965 or 1966. One of the two. Yeah, forgive me. The exact date is slipping me away. It's 1965 or 1966. Yeah. A couple years later, it forms a company that becomes known as Debswana. Yeah. Debswana. The Deb in Debswana stands for De Beers. De Beers, the big mining corporation that was founded. Let me ask this question. Brothers and sisters in the chat, who founded the De Beers Corporation? Who founded the De Beers Mining Corporation? Please, yeah, let me know. Who founded the De Beers Mining Corporation? I want to know, to know if people are in tune with the thing. Yeah. Who founded De Beers, brothers and sisters? I'm gonna wait to see the answers to that question come true. All right. Trigger Happy got another question. I'm gonna get to your question in a second. I'm asking the question: who founded the De Beers? Yeah, Mining Corporation. D-E-B-E-E-R. De Beers, for whom Lupita Nyong'o broke my heart last year when she became a brand ambassador for De Beers. Yeah. De Beers. All right. Heru has answered the question. Yeah. De Beers was founded by Cecil Rhodes. Yeah. Colonizer in chief. Yeah. De Beers, the diamond mining company that was exploiting. Yeah. Abeni has also answered the question. Cecil Rhodes. Yes. So all throughout Southern and Central Africa, De Beers was exploiting African labor, African land, African resources, and enriching Bakra, Muzungu, Oyibo, or Bruni. How do you say white man in Mandinka, Seku? I to the roll call. Seku, how do you say white man in Mandinka? Unmute yourself.
Yeah, you said to say what in Mandinka?
Yeah, what's the word for the white man in Mandinka?
Oh, for the white man, Tubabu.
Tubabu. I didn't know that, Tubabu. The Tubabu. Yeah. Cecil Rhodes was enriching himself as a Tubabu and the Tubabu nations, brothers and sisters. Yeah. In Europe, off of the exploitation off of these mines. Yeah. In Mama Africa, particularly in Southern Africa. Okay, this was before anything called the Union of South Africa existed. These are just white men and women colonizing Southern Africa and exploiting African land, labor, and resources. In 1966, I believe it's 66 that Botswana became independent. Yeah. One of the things, but bear in mind that was the same year that the Osagyefo for Kwame Nkrumah was overthrown in Ghana. By this time, Nkrumah is already assassinated in 1961. But one of the key issues that the anti-colonial movement is flagging up during this period of time is the apartheid regime in South Africa and white minority rule in Zimbabwe. Yes? That's what's happening at the time, brothers and sisters. Botswana becomes independent, and within a few years, brothers and sisters, now let me bring up the geography. Let me bring up a map. Yeah. All right. Just so you understand the geography of the thing. Because we don't engage in this frivolous conversation for the sake of getting views and likes around here, brothers and sisters. Yeah, we want to have a sensible conversation that can educate the people. So I'm going to bring up a map right here now, just so you can understand the geography of what it is I'm about to explain. Yeah? Hold on, brothers and sisters. I'm trying to sort out this boogies here. All right. So, yeah, because the map would bring to light some definitive aspects of the thing. Yeah? All right. So Google Maps, yeah? So you can see also, yeah, that you got South Africa at the southern tip of the continent, yeah? And the nation right here is Botswana, yeah? So South Africa shares a border with Zimbabwe over Yasso, Mozambique over Yasso, Eswatini over Yasso, and Namibia over Yasso. All of this area, this region, was being exploited by Cecil Rhodes and his family, yes? around this time, brothers and sisters, and more. Because I could even take it to Angola and Congo and Zambia and all of these things, right? But let's keep it to Namibia, Botswana, Zimbabwe, Mozambique, Eswatini, South Africa, and Lesotho for a second. So Botswana is not just north of South Africa. So in the anti-colonial movement, one of the things that people are doing is they're highlighting the corporations who are responsible for the imposition of the colonial order upon African people. And obviously, De Beers is one of the primary corporations, which is in league with what has become, in colonial times, the government of the Union of South Africa. Zimbabwe and South Africa are now seeking independence to institute white minority rule and develop their corporate dominance in Africa, independent from the mother country now. Yes, that's what's happening. The mother country being Britain in particular, and the Dutch nations in particular. So in the midst, brothers and sisters, of the fight against colonialism and the specific form of colonialism happening in Southern Africa, Seretse Kanyama, head of state of Botswana, enters into a business relationship with the corporate colonizer in chief and legitimizes their presence in Southern Africa as a result. When brothers and sisters in what is now called South Africa and Zimbabwe and Namibia and Eswatini are fighting against De Beers, are challenging De Beers, are ramping up and engaging in armed resistance against De Beers and the white minority government, Botswana legitimizes them by going into a business relationship with them. And when it began, I believe that the government of Botswana owned about 12% of the company. That grew over the years, and then the government of Botswana owned 50% of Debswana. And to a significant degree, the development of Botswana as a nation has been fundamentally and almost entirely reliant upon the diamond mining trade. Debswana exists all to today. And somewhere between 80 and 90% of the government's revenue is derived from the diamond mining trade. Yes? To the point whereby Botswana is now trying to diversify its industries, because up until this point, it has relied so heavily upon the diamond trade. I'm saying all that to say that what Brother Sekou made a point earlier now is whatever, when they define something as good or bad, is just dependent upon what defines their interest at a particular moment in time. Because in any other circumstance, they would define Botswana's economic model as heavy state intervention in the economy, which is supposed to be against the free market and therefore against capitalism as defined by the free market fundamentalist. For whatever reason, Botswana is now the darling economy and the model economy for the entirety of the African continent. Why? Because instead of resisting the colonizer, Botswana legitimized the colonizer. And many of us are parroting this narrative. Like we don't realize the lauding of Botswana as the model economy for Africa is fundamentally based upon the extent to which they did not displace and in fact serve the interest and created an environment for the colonizer to maintain his ownership and control over African land and resources. That is to say nothing of the extent to which Debswana has forcibly removed indigenous communities off their land for the sake of generating the profit. Brother Sekou has said that he has to jump off for now. Yeah, you know, the charger and all of these things. So give thanks, Brother Sekou, for your contributions to today's conversation. We appreciate you all the same. Yeah. All right. So to the extent, brothers and sisters, this is the now propaganda. Don't listen to them propaganda. Propaganda. Papa Garvey, you know. Papa Garvey said the white man. Yeah. The white man has given to the world, from his Bible to his yellow newspaper sheet, a narrative that presupposes and legitimizes his power and right to rule humanity to the disadvantage of the rest of the human race. And that Papa Garvey tell we. And no, we can't decide for the white man propaganda. We always seduced by the white man propaganda. The white man propaganda is entirely sexy to too many of us. It's ridiculous. Totally ridiculous. There's so many more examples I could go into, brothers and sisters, of this propaganda. Yeah, so be careful of the Botswana narrative. I'm not even saying, like I said, that there's not things that we can learn from the Botswana model. Yeah, a lot of the whatever government revenue they did accrue through this relationship, they invested in social services, school and hospital and all these things. That happened. That's true. The secret is, though, brothers and sisters, that Nkrumah and Nyerere did the same thing. That's what I'm not going to tell you. That whatever mistakes Nkrumah and Nyerere made, they achieved some things as well. That's what I'm not going to tell you. Propaganda. Right, I'm going to go through... Give thanks to Abeni for giving me the tubab. Yes, indeed. The questions in the chat, the comments in the chat. I hope one's got something and learned something from that little breakdown just this a while ago. Trigger Happy say, appreciate your commentary on my questions. I always thought it was crazy that communism is seen as a system of the highest efficiency, but it is void of spirituality. That seems impossible. Give thanks. Hold on, make sure now, Mr. Tags. So let me get all of them in. Right. Abeni, let's give me the fire emoji. Give thanks, Abeni. And so tell it. Vlad says, I'm Afro-Cuban. Hence the name. Great. I'm also in Toronto. Okay. Well, I want to link up. And I would encourage my Afro-Cuban brothers and sisters to use more Yoruba names and Kikongo names. Yeah, you know what I'm saying? Leave the Russian names to the Russian. But I take your point. Vlad. I take your point, you know? I take your point. From here on, let's get into the Kikongo names and Yoruba names, you know what I'm saying? Which I'm mentioning those two because a significant amount of the African culture in Cuba is derived from our Bakongo and Yoruba ancestors. Melaman says, gotkushTV, in my opinion, the problem to be solved is how to produce competitively without exploitation. How do you imagine we could do that? This is the question that Baba Chinwezu is saying that we need to engage in, yeah? And you notice I never act like I can answer all of these questions, yeah? I never act like I can answer all these questions definitively. I'm trying to answer these questions. I'm engaging in trying to tackle the problems, yeah? But I think we have some good examples, and I think that the principle of communal land custodianship is one, yes? That in all of our nations, one of the key factors, this is a particular problem in the Caribbean, and we're going to go into it in some detail in a show, because I got a particular show plan. I'm not gonna talk up the thing right, you know. But people don't have access to land. Yeah. And systems that provide people access to land, by nature of giving people access to resources and assets, reduce the types of exploitation that can be wielded against them. But as Baba Chinwezu has said, it's not just about us giving people access to things, you know. It's about us being able to industrialize whilst doing it, to develop economies of scale. Yes. And we need to a significant degree, reduce competition among ourselves for the sake of being able to compete viably with the rest of the world. And what happens at the moment is that the rest of the world, particularly the white world, has us competing against each other for their investment. Yeah. So if we look at, for example, one of the key, and I've been studying a bit of development economics, yeah, because it's an underdeveloped field in economics, yeah, but development economics, all right. And one of the key factors within a nation, particularly one that has been underdeveloped, being able to develop, is trade. Yeah, being able to trade. Okay, but then, and I've made this point before, whenever we discuss trade, we privilege white nations in terms of who we must be trading with. Yeah. So we need to be able to trade. But trade presupposes two things. One, that you are increasing your productive capacity. That is important because when they bring us free market economic policies, they emphasize what is referred to as free trade. Neither of these things exist in reality. But what they mean is that you must lower, quote unquote, barriers to trade and allow for an influx of what others want to export into your nation. This has the impact of depressing or maintaining a low productive capacity on the part of the nation in question. But no nation has developed itself without developing its productive capacity. That means it must be producing things to trade. Yeah. And then in order to trade, you must have a market. But our internal market has been severely depressed. I don't have the statistics in front of me, but look at the extent to which Africa trades with itself. There's 52 nations on the continent of Africa right now. And whilst we don't respect the borders, that's another subject for another time, just dealing with the states as they exist, as it stands right now, very little trade exists among them. Because trade relationships privilege Britain, America, France, and increasingly China. Look at the Caribbean and the extent to which the Caribbean trades with itself. Again, very little. Why? Because trade relationships privilege Britain and France and America and increasingly China. Yeah? So the questions, part of the reason why we're not solving these problems is because we're not asking the right questions, because our economic policies are being defined by British and American and Western international and transnational institutions. So we're focusing on trade barriers and free market and free trade and the import of goods made in these nations into our nations. Yeah. So again, I'm not saying I have all the answers here. I'm just saying that these are some of the considerations that we need to be focused on. But key among it, brothers and sisters, is focusing on increasing our productive capacity It's one of the reasons why that, in my humble estimation, Nkrumah got right. Shock horror. Over 100 industries were created in Ghana whilst Nkrumah was the president and prime minister. It wasn't perfect. It's one of the reasons why Grenada, I appreciate Grenada, because Grenada, in the 4 years that it was allowed to exist as a revolutionary nation, invested heavily in developing the productive capacity of the people, starting with agriculture, just turning value added agricultural produce into sellable items, canned and bottled items in juice and all them things there, chopped veg and fruit and all these things. Just start there, sir. Yeah. So these are some of the considerations that we need to take into consideration, that we need to be on. We need to define the questions by our own circumstances and not just be mimicking and aping what the IMF and the World Bank is saying. I think that's the last comment. Although I think that there might be a couple more now. Sister Joseph says, gotkushTV, our problem is internal. We murder each other at a high rate. That is a sign of competition. If not, what is it? I mean, yeah, I think it's a bit more complex than that. But yes, you know, in many African nations in the Caribbean, the extent to which the homicide rate is way too high. And no nation can develop itself within the context of such high and significant levels of violence. It's the reason why Congo is having many problems at the moment. It's one of the reasons why Jamaica is having many problems at the moment. Yeah, violence disturbs the social cohesion, and it's impossible to develop under those circumstances. Yeah. We also, though, have to contend that we are not going to solve the problem of violence, though, in our communities until we contend with the extent to which that violence manifests itself as a consequence of colonialism and neocolonialism. And that's not victim mentality and blaming the white man. That's actually taking responsibility. I want you to just know that. It's impossible to solve that problem unless we are prepared to contend with the extent to which violence among us is a consequence, a symptom of colonialism and neocolonialism. On the subconscious and the psychological level, as well as the material and the economic level. We're not going to solve that problem until we come to terms with those dynamics, how those dynamics relate to that problem, brothers and sisters. All right, it looked like coffee this up here. Yeah, the Trump and Biden trade tariffs on Chinese technology has affected its capacity to come true. Or maybe it was Eshu. I don't know. Either way, we're going to wrap up the show right now, brothers and sisters. Yeah. So I give thanks for you tuning in. If you have learned something, gained some information and or inspiration from today's show, give me a black power fist in the chat, brothers and sisters. Give me the black power fist in the chat. If you've learned something, gained something from today's show. You know what I mean? Yeah, man. Show some love in the chat. Bigging up Brother Seku. Yeah, bigging up Brother Seku. Thank you for coming through, my brother, and sharing your ever insightful wisdom. I always like it when Brother Seku comes around. Brother Seku, brothers and sisters, also is hosting a show on gotkushTV, soon to be known as Kima Media at the moment, called Jaliba, the African-centered perspective. Yeah, so do stay tuned. He did one in May. We've missed June, but he's gonna come back soon. Yeah, so do stay tuned for another episode of Jaliba, the Afrocentric perspective. Yeah, do stay tuned for that. I want to close with some more knowledge and information. from one of our great ancestors, Baba Kim Wanden de Kiabunseki Fukia. And I hope, brothers and sisters, I know I focus here a lot on geopolitical economic issues, and I do want to diversify the thing. I'm concerned with so much other issues. Like I said, next week we're going to be doing some man-woman issues. Yeah, next week we're going to be doing some relationship issues. Yeah, so do stay tuned. Some black male-female relationship issues. So come through next week or Jimmy Tuesday for that conversation. But I'm conscious of the fact that geopolitical economic conversation is at a deficit in our YouTube online community at the moment. And I'm saying that as somebody who doesn't consider myself to be running a YouTube channel. Kima Media is a media institution. And right now it's currently operating. One of the places currently operating is on YouTube. But as I've said consistently, at some point, we have to know so we can't get too comfortable around here. We're going to have to come off of this thing. Yeah. And I am very conscious of the fact that in all our religious debates and so on and so forth, and historical debate and debates on identity, that the geopolitics of things is not being sufficiently addressed. And so while I do want to diversify the topics, as I've always tried to do, I make no apology, yeah, for bringing these topics on geopolitical realities. And I hope that brothers and sisters are getting something from it, all right? I hope that it goes some way to balancing a lot of the other conversation that is taking place. And I do hope that ones appreciate that even though we are discussing these geopolitical topics, that we add and the spiritual and the cultural context to it consistently. I do hope ones appreciate that. Yeah. Words of Baba Kim Wanden de Kiabunseki Fukiao, as contained in the book African Cosmology of the Bantu Congo, Principles of Life and Living. One of the essential characteristics of the Congo system of property is its inalienability. There is no valuable condition that could change this inalienability of ancestral land. Land was not a commodity to be bought and sold. Land was inalienable in the traditional system. Each domain was owned by a certain matrilineage, which could indeed grant the use of a part of its area to a relative or even a foreign matrilineage. But this did not mean that it gave up its land rights. In their Fukia Nsi, the unwritten law, Fukia Nsi, the unwritten law, the traditional land system, the Congo say to sell community land is to carry a mortal yoke. Wateka Ntoto Wakanda Neti Ngororo, or Vangu. Malengru also wrote about the same concept of the inalienability of the land among other so-called Bantu people of the Congo Basin. He says that the African communalistic concept of society was based on a very strong law, that of the indivisibility and inalienability of the land. Whoever does not have access to land is dead, no matter how rich he and she is. So as I've said before, brothers and sisters, one of the primary areas of development that I can see is when we look at our indigenous land systems, the possibility of developing industrial scale cooperatives out of them is something that I think is an obvious area for us to work on and develop on as a people. That's across the African diaspora. And so hopefully through our work in Zivanai, through the development of the Ujamaa Black Group Economic Show, we will be able to elucidate those possibilities in greater detail. That we depend on here. I said, we're not just having a media debate and discussion thing. This is a media institution for the propagation of African-centered, Pan-African, universal African nationalist ideas, thought, and practice, brothers and sisters. As I close, let me reiterate that next week, the 11th of July, we have Elder Cecil Gutsmore joining us again. Is revolutionary Pan-Africanism the praxis for African liberation now? If you are not familiar with Elder Cecil Gutsmore, I implore you to come through. Yeah, our elder has much knowledge and wisdom to share with us, and I have a feeling this one's going to be a special one. Yeah, I have a feeling it's going to go in. All right, I just have a feeling. Yeah, so come through. And especially if nothing in this title makes sense to you, you especially need to come through, because Elder Cecil will break it down in expert fashion. So we're starting at 7 p.m. British time, UK time on that day, which corresponds to 2 p.m. Across the water EST. Yeah, and then Drums of Mosiah on the birthday of the Prophet. We are going to be taking over Brixton Square, or Windrush Square, in a Brixton from 5 p.m. brothers and sisters. Bring your drum and come. Bring your drum and come. Bring your any percussion and come. And unana drum. Bring your dancing feet and your singing voice, brothers and sisters. Yes, indeed. Yeah. So there's no official nothing. Just bring your drum and come. Yeah. And you can bring a chair as well. Yeah. The supermarket, them are selling them good wrap-up chairs. Yeah, where you can buy and full it out and come through. And you know what I mean? Or let's bring a strap and come through. You know what I'm saying, for the Drums of Mosiah. And I should also say this is taking place as a part of an international call. So Drums of Mosiah will be taking place simultaneously. The places that I know about right now are in Washington, D.C. and in Freetown, Sierra Leone. And there are other brothers and sisters who are going to be jumping on board. Yeah, you don't have to get permission. If you are engaged in Drums of Mosiah wherever you are, just do it. Organize it. Let me know, and I will also promote it so brothers and sisters can know where you were there. All right, brothers and sisters. We also want to reiterate that our people in Grenada, Carriacou, and Petit Martinique, in the wake of Hurricane Beryl, are in need of our support, brothers and sisters. And so we want to, share our love and our strength with our brothers and sisters, but they need more than our prayers. They need our support. And so the drop-off point for West London at the moment is Mo Better Cuts in Labrador Grove, brothers and sisters, W10 5NQ. Water, children and adult clothes, nappies, toiletries, once again including sanitary towels, etc., is required. Yeah, so you can drop off there, and I'm sure there'll be others coming in and around the city and in and around the country. And so in future shows, we will share with you, brothers and sisters, Wagwan. I had the pleasure of hearing the voice of my big sister Oneness, who is residing in Grenada, and she said, it was techie, you know what I'm saying? But brothers and sisters are gathering to assist each other, yeah, in helping to repair what has been damaged and so on and so forth. And it's been a testy time, but brothers and sisters are well. At least as far as Grenada is concerned. Set Imhotep is in the building, and I was able to get a word from him as well. Mostly Trinidad and Tobago got a holy rain, yeah, and some flooding. But as far as he is aware, there has been no fatalities as far as Trinidad is concerned, yeah. So we give thanks for that mercy, and we send our love and our strength to our brothers and sisters in Trinidad and Tobago, Barbados, Jamaica, and anywhere else, brothers and sisters, that Beryl Seshawan reach. Yeah, we know that this happens as far as the Caribbean islands are concerned periodically, and we know that these hurricanes are increasing. Yeah, the nature of these hurricanes, and the frequency of these hurricanes seems to be increasing in today's world. And so there's even an economic dimension to that in terms of our capacity to withstand these quote unquote natural disasters. Yeah, but that's another subject for another time. Let us support our brothers and sisters wherever you are. Pay attention to where the drop-off points are, and please do send your relief in. for our brothers and sisters in the Caribbean. And with that, I say unto thee, Tendai Mwadi, be thankful unto the Mother, Father, creative life force of the universe. Kudzai Mudzimu Mukulu. We give praises unto our great ancestors. Abibi Tumi, Abibi Fahodi, African power and African liberation for all African people. Ashe, Ashe, Ashe.
New era, new transition. Greetings, this is Shakara, and it's been an honor serving you as director of gotkushTV. Over the past few years, we've brought you the pilot of the Black Root Economic Show, many seasons of Wordsmith, The Insight, and the ever-popular Decipher. We have covered community events and even hosted a few of our own, including Blacktricity, as a part of the official Ghana Beyond the Return roster. We also kept you company throughout lockdown with the Quarantine Convo. After a brief hiatus, we came back with our regular weekly interactive live show, Zivanai, keeping you up to date with current events around the Black world, from UK to Senegal to Haiti and beyond. It is our aim to continue to develop as a premier Black media institution, and for that reason, we have a special announcement. Introducing Kima Media. Between the 10th of June and the 17th of Mosiah, August, we will be transitioning to a new name and institution, Kima Media. In the beautiful Kiswahili language, Kimbunga means whirlwind.
Look for me in a whirlwind or a storm. Look for me all around you. For with God's grace, I shall come back with countless millions of black men and women who have died in America, those who have died in the West Indies, and those who have died in Africa, to aid you in the fight for liberty, freedom, and life.
Our name symbolizes our aim to take the media landscape by storm, developing high quality, impactful, geopolitical and cultural content aimed at empowering African people, bringing knowledge, information, inspiration and analysis from an unapologetically Pan-African, universal African nationalist and African-centered perspective. So, what can you expect? We are gradually developing a full spectrum of flagship shows and presenters. But in the immediate right here now, over the next couple years, we have two major aims in bringing you our flagship shows. One, the return of Kush Commununiversity, bringing you high-level scholarship in all areas of people activity, featuring luminaries from across the Black world. And two, the production of the full first season of the new and improved Ujamaa Black Root Economic Show. While we encourage you to develop and support Black businesses, this show aims to raise our awareness of the political economy of today's world and popularize new solution paradigms in political economy among African people. Alongside all this, we will continue to bring you Zivanai, Jaliba, the Afrocentric perspective, All Eyes on Africa, Ghana, Democracy Under Fire, the Revolutionary Minds team with that artistic, ancestral energy, and as things grow and develop, there'll be plenty more. We also have plans to host live events and film screenings, so stay tuned for more information on that. So what can you do? Continue to support us by watching, liking, sharing and commenting on our content. Be sure to follow us on all social media, and if you are so moved, join our Patreon community. We'll be sharing flagship shows exclusively with our Patreon community before general release and granting you discounts to events and future screenings. Right now, if you become a Patreon, you will have access to the pilot for the Black Group Economic Show and all installments of last year's Black History Month series, Sankofa, The Future of Black History. At some point, we'll be engaging in community crowdfunding towards the production of the new and improved Ujamaa Black
Group Economic Show, complete with offerings and perks for those who choose to invest in us. Look out for the launch, and we thank you in advance for your support. Any questions, feel free to hit us up in the comment section and we'll be sure to address. We look forward to you joining us for this new phase of our development. Stay tuned as we bring you Kima Media.
Black people, we've got to fight. Jean Petro, you see us. Oguo, we've got to fight. Let's go fight. Oh, Black people, we've got to fight. Zumbi, you see us. Oh, we've got to fight. Let's go fight. Oh, Black people, we've got to fight. Yes, Santa, why you see us? Oh, we've got to fight. Let's go fight. Oh, Black people, we've got to fight. Bookman, you see us. Oh, we've got to fight. Let's go fight. Oh,
we have to have the courage to construct our own reality. And that's what Garvey was talking about. Because he said he looked around, he didn't see what he thought should be there, and so what did he do? He didn't get depressed about it. He didn't get defeated about it. He said, I'm going to build the government that we need to have. Ooh, where do you get that kind of boldness from? So we got to go all the way back to Garvey, who said he would come again. He said he would be here with us, no matter how long it took. And I'm telling you that the way he comes back is in our work. Not honoring him in words, pomp, and all of that stuff, but honoring him through doing what he did. How many of us have the courage to do that? The man took on the world for us and in our name. And then we come to Sodai. And in this presentation of the paradigm, I'm going to make this like what it is we want to reach. So Sodai is translated clear word in Dogana language. And I use it to mean that here we gain understanding. This is sight with understanding. And it is seeing beyond what just we think we see with this physical thing. It's seeing beyond that. And so we gain vision, because that's what vision is. With vision, you've got to be able to use the imagination. The imagination informed by the African spirit. And Brother Amos, who I work very closely with, was a good friend of mine. He taught me, and he would talk about imagination. Image a nation. Do you see? But that's got to be part of vision. To be a visionary, you got to see beyond this box here. You got to see beyond the ma'afa. You got to see what is it that our people rightfully should have, and that's what Garvey did. Garvey had a vision.